As a quick introduction, and we are recording this meeting, I'm Lindsay Sagasta. I am the Child and Youth Violence Epidemiologist. Previously, there was another Lindsay Keppert, who had led a lot of these trainings and done a lot of this work for us as a consultant. We're very thankful for her work. Her contract ended with us, and so now I will be taking over in this role and really taking charge of the data and evaluation for this grant. I'm joined by Jane, Steve, and Keisha, also from the Child Youth Violence Prevention Unit at Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and they are each of your contract managers, depending on your grant funding, primary violence prevention, opportunity youth, and safe spaces programs as well. So they are also on the call and can be reached by chat as well. And then for anyone who's joined, we're just doing some quick introductions in the chat too to see all the different programs. So this is a training to actually go through the REDCap platform, which is going to be new for quarterly reporting requirements for this grant funding. And so I'm going to give a preview of the REDCap or of the quarterly report template, and then we'll do like a demonstrated training in REDCap. So I'm going to switch to share my screen, do a quick presentation, and then we'll move to some actual work in REDCap. Great. So we did our welcome and introductions, and then we're going to move into the orientation to the new CYYVPU HEAL quarterly reporting tool. I'll do a REDCap via PowerPoint slides. It'll be a little bit of a refresher from the previous training in November, and then we'll move into an actual demonstration within the platform. We'll have time for some questions and answers, and then we'll talk about a wrap up and next steps, and also have time to stay on for people to be able to work in REDCap if they would like, and I'll stay on kind of in a technical assistance role to continue to answer questions and allow you to explore the program directly after getting a preview and demonstration of it as well. So where we've been and where we're going with this new quarterly reporting operation that we're doing for the HEAL funding. In October, we had a brief overview of the quarterly report at that first HEAL kickoff meeting. And then we distributed some of the CYYVPU reporting documents via Excel or Word document templates for programs to begin seeing the new changes to the quarterly reporting tool as a result of the new funding. In November, we built the tool into REDCap, and then Lindsay Keppert delivered the quarterly report webinar, which reviewed the documents and changes from previous years and previewed REDCap. So the November 29th webinar was recorded. If you have not seen that webinar yet, we encourage you to do so and can share the link to that webinar as well. In January, we did a REDCap username rollout to programs where data contacts, backup data contacts, and any other additional contacts for data in each program were provided an activation link to be able to use REDCap. And then we're also provided with access directly to the CYYVPU quarterly report tool in REDCap. Today, we're doing the quarterly reporting training for REDCap webinar. And then on January 20th, we have our first due date for this new funding year, where you will submit Q1 and Q2 data combined for your program to REDCap. And then in spring 2023, we plan to schedule a REDCap data review training. So one of the great things about this tool is that you are able to go back and look at all of your data in aggregate across quarters, or look specifically at the data in a way that can be helpful and beneficial to your program's reporting for other funding requirements or other grant applications. So we want to be able to make sure you can utilize that tool and be able to look back at all of the data that you've been able to enter and share with us. Here is just a quick overview of what year 1 data collection looks like. This is slightly different than what years 2 through 10 will look like, just because due to our time being able to create the REDCap tool, get it ready for everyone, we have decided to combine Q1 and Q2 collection, and that report will be due on the 20th. Q3, which you will collect data from January to March, will be due April 20th. And then Q4, which you will collect data from April to June, will be due on July 20th. And that is how each of the quarters will kind of work moving forward, is that the 20th of the month following the end of that previous quarter is when your REDCap report will be due. So here's an overview of the quarterly reporting tool. This slide will probably look very familiar from the previous webinar, but programs are expected to report on activities and services funded as a part of the HEAL grant, and also characteristics of youth reach or served by each program. We've moved to data collection through an online REDCap survey platform, and that each program has received REDCap usernames and was granted electronic access to the HEAL quarterly reporting tool. Reporting will occur 4 times per fiscal year, covering a 3-month period, and it will only happen 3 times in fiscal year 2023 due to that delay in the first quarter. So here are some relevant reporting documents for you to be aware of. We did provide a Word document of the quarterly report template, quarterly report instructions, as well as a sample intake spreadsheet. You can use these documents to familiarize yourselves with quarterly reporting expectations and metrics, plan for REDCap data entry, and guide updates for your data collection tools. When we actually go into the tool in REDCap, you will see that the template and instructions are attached as Word documents to the actual tool, so you'll be able to access and download the most up-to-date versions every time you're accessing the tool as well. But we do think that printing these out ahead of time and be able to fill them in before you bring it to REDCap to complete it could be a way to help understand what data is needed and then work in the virtual platform to be able to enter the data as well. All right, so we're going to move into the REDCap preview, which is just going to show the tool via screenshots and several different slides, just kind of as a way to introduce all of the elements again, and then we'll move into the actual work in the platform. So once you select the quarterly reporting tool and open it up to add a record, which each record will be your data collection for that quarter, it'll start with looking at the program information, which you will select your service model type, a drop-down menu for your agency name. You'll select the reporting period that you're reporting for and the calendar year of service. So for example, this first submission, you're going to be selecting reporting period Q2, even though you are entering for Q1 and Q2, and the calendar year of service, where all of the data that you're collecting, that you're sharing was collected, was in 2022. And so this is an example. Bagley, if any representatives are on the call, you're the first in our alphabetical list. So a lot of the times the examples, we just select Bagley, so apologies. But here's an example for that program, being a part of the service model type Safe Spaces, selecting reporting period Q2, then acknowledging the calendar year of service for this data was 2022. When we do Q3 reporting, it'll be Q3 and then calendar year of service 2023. And then after that, you'll quantify, you'll start in the part 1, which is quantifying program reach. The first question is asking about which HEAL priority populations your program has served this quarter, and you will select all of these priority populations that apply to your program. And so here is an example that a program might select all of these different priority populations that they have served. If you do select other priority youth populations, please specify an option to specify that population will pop up to be able to write in. And then this is where we move into similar questions to the previous quarterly reporting and previous funding about asking about new and returning youth reached in the past quarter. So these tables, once we're in REDCap, you'll notice have some automatic calculations to allow you to see kind of, I've added my new youth trained working as youth development staff and youth reached directly, and it'll give you a full total of what we're expecting the total number of youth reached directly was. So you'll be able to see that. And so we ask these youth categories both in new, so the first time you are working with those youth in that in the fiscal year, but also returning. So if there were some youth that you reached in Q1 or Q2, and and you are entering for Q3, you would then put the returning youth in the rightmost column. And then we also have the youth reached indirectly below. And so here's an example for how this might be populated in REDCap. So for here, this program had 1 new youth trained or working as a youth development staff, and 5 youth reached directly other than being trained or working as youth development staff. And then so the total number of youth directly reached, which was automatically calculated by REDCap, is 6. And then, so this must have been in Q3. So there are some returning youth to acknowledge. 4 youth returned who were trained or working as youth development staff. 25 youth were reached directly other than being trained or working as youth development staff, for a total of 29. So we know
Can I
there are—
ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please.
Is this returning within this reporting period?
Within the fiscal year, yes. So
within the fiscal year. Okay,
returning
great. And
since July.
sure. And for Q1 and 2 being combined, everybody would just be new.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out right away. So yes, we will be expecting for this first report due on January 20th that there will be no returning youth identified in REDCap, because every youth will be new to us because we are combining Q1 and Q2. So you will actually be entering, you're welcome, zeros in the returning column in this first time that you enter the data. Thank you so much for clarifying and pointing that out. And then you'll have the youth reached indirectly. On the bottom of each of these boxes in the blue text, you'll see a data check. So it's the total number of youth directly reached. And based on the numbers provided, you have directly reached 35 youth in Q2. So this will be another automatic calculation that comes from combining the new and the returning youth that were directly reached. So just a data check to keep in mind as your totals, as you're moving forward, because there's questions that will then ask you to break down those youth into different demographic categories. And we'll want to make sure, because we are using this virtual platform now, that the numbers actually match or are greater than, or in whatever specification that question might need, are actually accounted for those demographics. So then we move into asking about age categories. And so a youth should only be counted in only one age category. So this is another one of those ones that has a data check at the bottom that pulls in your total number of youth reached directly from the first table that you completed, to make sure that you're checking and seeing that the total of new youth is actually equaling 6, because we do want an age for every one of those youth. And then your returning youth as well should equal 29. We do recognize that there could be circumstances where you truly don't know the age of the youth, didn't collect it. For some reason, it's not there. And so we do have an unknown or undisclosed category to allow you to make up to that point of having the same amount in the total number of youth directly reached and what the calculated field is. So here's an example using the previous numbers of how this will look. Again, there will be automatic calculations for you that show up in red to see where your totals are. And note with also, thank you for the point that for returning, there'll be 0. You do need to enter 0 wherever there aren't any youth calculated or any youth counted, because we are looking for a number in every single one of these boxes. The calculation will not work if there isn't a 0 or a number in there. So please, if you're having errors, try just filling in 0 everywhere a number is required that you haven't, and that might be able to fix the error as you're submitting. Again, we have the race, ethnicity questions that we're asking. And so for this one, it's a little bit different because a youth can belong to more than one racial or ethnic category and may be counted in more than one category for this question. So it is okay if your total calculated field is greater than the actual number of youth reached directly. But we do at least want to see the numbers reaching the youth reached directly. And so if we do have some races that are unknown, to use the undisclosed or unknown category as well. And then we move into gender identity categories. A youth should be counted to only one gender identity category. So the sum of the age of categories, there's a typo there that I will have to fix in REDCap. The sum of the gender identity categories must add up to the number of youth trained or reached directly. So this one has that data check that reminds you, we do want to have one-to-one equality in this question. So 6 and 29 should be the automatically calculated totals here. We have one more question, question 6, asking about priority youth categories. And so this one does not have a data check anymore because a youth can belong to more than one priority youth category and may be counted in more than one category, but we recognize that not all youth will be included in the priority youth categories. So this one does not have the data check, and you just to enter the number of youth that fall into these categories. After we've quantified the youth that you have reached with your activities and services, we move on to reporting and quantifying activities. So depending on the funding stream that you selected in that first question, you will get a different list of activities that are associated with your program on this in this section. So everyone gets this first set from academic assistance to volunteer work, but then there will be an additional safe spaces or additional opportunity youth or additional primary violence prevention list that does show up as options for you to include activities. This list was created by Lindsay Keppert. She went through previous quarterly reports from previous funding years to really be able to quantify and understand those activities, either specifically named in the RFR or what we saw previous programs were reporting doing based on this funding stream. So in this list, you will check all of the different activities that your program had completed in the past quarter. And so for our example here, we have that this Safe Spaces program conducted mentor programming and volunteer work. And so because we have REDCap as a virtual platform, you will then only see the tables show up for mentor programming and volunteer work. You won't have to add zeros to every single activity or program that you didn't do. It'll just allow mentor program and volunteer work to show up. You'll be required to fill in those tables, but not the others. And so as mentoring and volunteer work are selected, here are the two tables that then will pop up on our screen, and you'll be able to select yes or no what types of activities within that type of activity you did complete. So for this example, as Lindsay was following this through, this program did not do adult mentoring, but did do peer mentoring and did not do other mentoring activities. So because they did peer mentoring and selected yes, a bigger table shows up to allow you to enter the data for that specific activity. Because there was a no in adult mentoring and no in other mentoring activities, you won't have to fill out the rest of that table. So here is the example then of the peer mentoring table completed. You will select what type of mode of activity that that activity was in. So if it was in person and online, if it was just in hybrid, you'll select those and then you'll quantify the reach. It asks you, in some ways, these will all be a little different depending on the actual activity, but they're very similar in the counts. But this one's specifically asking about the total number of peer mentors, total number of peer mentoring sessions within that quarter, that reporting period, the number of new youth receiving peer mentoring, the number of returning youth receiving the peer mentoring, and then it'll calculate the total number of youth receiving peer mentoring. Then we ask that everyone briefly describes how this activity was implemented. It provides us a really good idea of what is going on in the programs, and then it also gives an update to the contract managers to see what each program is doing. So you're welcome to describe this in any detail that you would like. We say briefly, but if you would like to provide a little bit more information, you can. But if there is a text box that shows up within any of these tables, we are expecting text in it. If you were to submit this and left it blank, you would have to go back and add text into here. So we are looking for a description wherever it is asked. And then part two, after you've selected all of the different activities and then fill in all of your data for the activities that your program did, we have additional questions about your program's activities in the past quarter that all have yes or no. If you select yes, you'll be asked to briefly describe the yes, and if you select no, then you'll be able to move on to the next question. So for these, as an example, for questions 8, 9, 10, and 11, this respondent selected no. But for question 12, has your program or program staff attended any training since the last reporting period? They selected yes. And so if yes, the box shows up to list those trainings here. And these are trainings provided by MDPH and trainings provided by outside vendors. So if your program attended the November 29th quarterly reporting webinar, and then your program's here on January 10th, you can include both of those, plus additional trainings that were provided by outside vendors. Or I know that some of the strands have already had some strand-specific trainings, such as the root cause analysis training. So you can add those in there as well. All right, so then specifically in quarters 1 and quarters 3, there is not a part 3. So if you are in the process of reporting for either of those 2 quarters, after part 2, you will go to submission information, which is shown here. But if you're in quarter 2 or quarter 4, there is a part 3. So we're asking this every 6 months about your planning and evaluation of the new activities included in this new funding round for the HEAL grant. And so these questions are just asking for you to describe any planning or activities related to the implementation of the following scope of work requirements, just sharing progress made, any accomplishments, any challenges, and any needed resources. This is another resource for the contract managers to understand kind of where we are and where we're moving towards the newly added scopes of funding. So behavioral health supports, community engagement and mobilization, enhanced bullying and harassment prevention, and helping youth to develop independent living and financial skills. Again, we need some type of text in each one of these boxes, or else you'll have to go back and it won't be able to submit the form. After that, we also ask about the different principles and activities required in the HEAL funding. So asking to what degree you feel your program has increased its capacity in the following areas in the past 6 months. So you'll select one of the degrees of improvement and then briefly describe why you selected that degree of improvement. And again, we will require that something is written in this text box. And there are 8 different principles or activities to select. And then we ask about any additional supports you need to improve your capacity. Yes, is there a question? Oops, sorry, I thought I heard someone come off mute. So we'll ask about the additional supports you need to improve your capacity in these areas. If there's no additional supports, please just write no additional supports. And then our last question is asking if there's been any positive or negative unintended consequences of the program's work. You can select all that apply. And yes, if you have both positive and negative unintended consequences, you can select both of those. And there will be a text box that pops up that you'll be able to share and describe what those unintended consequences were that your program experienced.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Excuse me. There is a question in the chat, and I'm only pointing it out because I do have the same question.
Okay. I actually, I can't see the chat right now, and oh wait, no, I can open this up. I'm sorry, I was not monitoring that.
I can read it to you.
Yes, if you want to point out this specific one that you have a question for right now.
It says, we are reporting on quarter 1 and quarter 2 together in one report, correct? Do we select quarter 2 when starting the report? And since we're reporting quarters 1 and 2 together, do we do this part? Which is my question.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and I will make sure that that's clear when I'm doing the demonstration, but yes, you will be selecting quarter 2 for this report. And so yes, this 6 months questionnaire that comes up as part 3, yes, you will be doing this questionnaire as a part of the reporting due on January 20th.
Thank you.
Thanks. And let me scroll up. I'm so sorry that I missed the chat, everyone. Why is the returning number higher? So for the example of this programming, it could have been such as in Q3 that the examples were provided. So it is likely after a few quarters that the returning number could be higher and there are just less new youth in the next quarter. And then can I clarify youth trained or working as youth development staff? I'm actually wondering, can a contract manager hop in to answer specifically how we're defining youth trained or working as youth development staff? I would think they are in a role that is specifically working as a development staff for your programming versus just coming into the program and being a part of specific activities such as a drop-in space or mentoring, but there's like an elevation of that youth involvement in the programming.
So youth trained will be, you'll capture those numbers for any training that you have for youth. And for youth development staff, though, they will be the young people who you're mentoring. You may have delivered trainings, they may be receiving stipends. And so that's how we're distinguishing it. But with the form, we will definitely have clear definitions, especially for the folks that aren't on the call. So thank you for that question. Does that make sense?
There's a follow-up about what do you mean by trained? So Jane, can you give some examples?
Any training that you have for youth. So let's just say that you have a training for your youth on bias, unintentional bias. So it's a training that your organization offers for the youth. The training could be a training that you may have an outside person come in and they will deliver a training on, let's say, restorative justice. So if you offer any training for your youth, but if you don't offer training for youth, then that would be zero. So you may consider your weekly meetings, your mentoring meetings, like included in that, embedded in those services. You may include training. And so that way you wouldn't necessarily have a separate category for training. Does that make sense? Or did I answer your question?
And there's one more follow-up about curriculum sessions.
Oh, okay. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry, what is the answering a question that's in REDCap that says how many curriculum sessions that you're delivering?
So I think there's just a specific, if a curriculum session could be considered a youth trained.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. How about curriculum session? Okay, yes. Yes, so if you're, so I'm going to use Impact, for example, like in their curriculum, they have sessions on anti-bullying. So that would be considered youth trained, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Jane, for adding the contract manager expertise to allow to give some more interpretation and definitions to these. And Jane, you did point out that we do have instructions as well attached to the REDCap and things that we've provided. So although I kind of walk through and gave a brief description of what we might be looking for, the previous Lindsay did a very, very thorough instruction document that does have some routine definitions for all of these types of questions that we're asking and what we mean. So that is a really good resource to be able to go back and check to see if you are following that interpretation and have any questions. And then always the contract manager's emails are open to then be able to ask more specific questions about if your interpretation or how you're planning to answer this is aligned with what we are looking for as well. So definitely can use the instruction guidance as well as the contract manager's expertise to continue to answer these questions. It's important that we work together for these interpretations to make sure that we are having streamlined reporting across all programs so we can truly be able to share and share out all of the work you are doing and being very clear and accurate about the work that is being done. So thank you for these questions and also thank you for directing me to the chat.
And just one more note. So if you, and I'm thinking of MASH now. So like if you have peer leaders that you would have them go through a full training so that they can deliver services, that would be considered the youth who are mentors. So it wouldn't be youth trainings, but it would be the other category. We'll work on clearer terms and definitions, and we'll circulate them to have you guys offer feedback.
Yes, this is always going to remain a work in progress as well.
Yeah.
So what is entered in this quarter, and we do change the interpretation slightly because we've had more conversations and are understanding what you're doing on the ground. That will help us inform how we're interpreting these and sharing it out with the rest of the programs as well. So we do recognize that we are providing this type of data entry and collection, but you are actually doing the work on the ground. And so our expectations could be slightly different, and we just need to work together to come to a collective meaning about what you're doing, how we can collect this, and how we can truly represent it. So continue to ask the questions and say, hold up, this might not be working for how it's working for us.
Lindsay, would it be helpful if Emily and I kept an eye on the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll do that. Is that okay, Emily?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on the chat. So we'll be pushy and interrupt you.
Yes, please interrupt me. Okay, thanks. We just have a few more slides of this slide deck, and then we'll move into the actual screen sharing of the tool. Okay, there we go. So then at the end of part 3, if you're submitting for quarters 2 or 4, or at the end of part 2, if you're submitting for quarters 1 or 3, we get to the submission information where we will, where you will enter a name, an email address, phone number, and date for who submitted this information. I do recognize, and we recognize that many programs have more than one REDCap account, and that there might be several different people working at the same time on the same record. Just choose someone to be the primary contact for the submission information. It's really just so that I might be able to check back in, or the contracts managers might be able to check back in about something. It's just helpful to have that information associated so we can kind of clarify and get directly to someone as needed. But we can recognize that if we ask a question of someone, but it needs to be directed to someone else, that it'll work through. And so as well at the bottom, you'll be able to select the status of this record that you're entering as either incomplete, unverified, or complete. So say you're just working through it, you're not totally done, you want to check it over with your program, you can leave the status as incomplete and then select save and exit form. But if you are done, you'll be able to mark complete and then also save and exit form. You should be able to go back, and this might take a little bit of testing. You should be able to go back to edit even if you've said complete. At some point we will lock them, but we haven't made that decision as a team to when we'll lock the data specifically so that programs can't go back and edit. But we recognize there's a learning curve to this, so there might be something realized in a couple months to be able to change it. As you select save and exit form, it will let you know if anything is not fully completed that needs to be complete, and kind of give you a little warning about that as well. This completion status just kind of changes what the logo looks like in REDCap, which I will show you once we are on that side of the program. And so here's just an example of Lindsay submitting this information. All right, so I'm gonna move into the REDCap demonstration. So just give me a couple seconds to get this set up. Okay. All right. Are people seeing the presentation, or are people seeing the REDCap login?
The REDCap login.
Great, okay. And let me just get rid of that. And that. Great, so the great Steve Smythe has allowed me to use his login to be able to share from a view that the vendors will also be able to see, or all the program staff will be able to see as well. So I'm going to quickly log in via his account. And so once you log in, you will be directed to the My Projects page, which depending if you already had an account and have another program through DPH, you might have some other projects listed here. If you're only using REDCap for this specific program in DPH, you will just see the project title, which is BChap, DVIP, CYYVPU, HEAL quarterly reporting. And so once you open up the My Projects page, and I apologize if this text is just a little small, you should be able to zoom on, but once we open up the actual reporting tool, it should be easier, or I could try switching which screen I'm sharing. But you'll kind of just be able to see all the different current users that are working in this program and then some project statistics. So then in some of these project statistics, something that you'll notice is that there's going to be a total count, but then an in-group count. Every REDCap user has been assigned to a data access group. Your data access group is your program. So everyone within your program is in your same DAG, data access group. And so you can only see the records uploaded that are from your data access group. So you won't be able to go in and see everyone else's data. Your data is protected. The only people that will be able to see your data access group data are the program staff assigned to your program, and then any other EPIs. It's me, and then my supervisor, Vera, will also be able to see your data as well. Because Steve is a contract manager, he has this extra blue box up here that allows him to switch which DAG he's looking at. So he can then pick one of the Safe Spaces programming and be able to see their specific data. But right now, I just have him set up in a test data access group. So I'm just being the test program right now. So I can only see the data already entered in the test group. There is also this REDCap Messenger. I have not used it. If programs would like to try to use it, because I believe you can start a conversation with other users involved in the program. So you might be able to find another user within your program, and it might be another way to be able to start a message or complete some tasks in REDCap as well. So if anyone does use that in any way and wants to share out some TA or anything that they are learning from it, that would be something great that we would be welcome to hearing in the future. So then this is Project Home, and then you can open up a code book if you're very, very interested in how we've labeled all the data indicators. There is a nice code book that you could open. So if anyone else is a little bit more of a data nerd and wants to see everything, you can do that as well. This might be helpful in the future if you were ever to export your data into an Excel file because you want to run some other type of analysis on your own data. This code book could be helpful in that way. You'll mostly be working in this data collection area. So as you can see, I'm in green here, and I do apologize. This is probably a little small for you. So if anyone has the TA to how to zoom in from your own screen and wants to share that in the chat. But I'm in the test, so I can only see the record status and add or edit records within that test data access group. So you'll work a lot in this record status dashboard or the add or edit records. When I select on this, it allows me to kind of see all of the different records that have been added within the program. They default to the number associated with your data access group and the record number that in order of how you've entered them, but you are able to rename this record. And I will show everyone how to do that as well. I have already gone in previously and completed a record for this account. So there is a complete status icon for this particular record. So I'm going to select this record ID just to show how once you select it, you can go to choose action for the record and you can rename the record. So if people were to rename the record, I believe we'll be able to see this as a contract staff. So it would be really helpful to be able to include like your data access group or your program name, potentially the quarter, and then the calendar service year or the fiscal year, any way to denote what year this quarter is associated with to rename it. So I've just renamed it in a way that I know it's coming from test, it's Q2, and it's fiscal year 2023, because in my assumptions, once I can look at every single record that's been added, then I can look at it more clearly about what program it's coming from and not just all the numbers. But if you just put Q2, it won't be clear to me, and I'll have to open the record and be able to see where this is actually coming from. But as we go into the actual report that you'll do, you do know that you can select your program so that your information to show that it's from your program will still be there. All right, so that is one that I've already done, and I just wanted to kind of show how it'll look once it's in the record status dashboard. But once you want to start a record, you will go to add or edit records. You can either select a previous record that your program has done to continue working on it, or you can add a new record. So if it's the first time that your program is adding a record, you'll select this. But if someone else in your program has already started, or you want to go back to a record, you will just select down and work on that record. There should only be one record per quarterly report deadline due date. So we don't want a bunch of different ones. You'll be collaborating on that same record. So I just selected add a new record. It is showing up. And this is what it will look like. So you'll have at the top, you'll know that it's a CYVPU HEAL quarterly report. It has renamed itself to that 822-1 record ID. So once this is over, I can go back and change this to a different record name. So it's more clear to what this record I'm working on is. And then you'll see here that you are able to download the most up-to-date Word template and instructions for the programming as well. So this is one way you can always access if you don't have them directly accessible in your email or on your desktop. And then, so in the same way that it looked on the PowerPoint slide, it's kind of just a long form of all of those tables as well. So I'll just work through and I'll select just because I remember directly that this is going to be a service model for safe spaces. I'll get the drop-down menu of all of the different programs that are associated with this funding. And just picking on Bagley again, as they're the first ones to select that. And because this is, we're submitting for Q2, but we know it's both Q1 and Q2, I will be selecting Q2. By selecting Q2 right here, it'll prompt the part 3 below to show up. So everything is very logically connected in this, in that if it's selected, the required questions will show up for you. You don't have to go searching for them. And if they don't end up showing up because it wasn't a part of what you selected, then that isn't required for you to complete. And then we know that this was done in calendar year service 2022. And then just working through, I'll select some of the priority populations that my program served this quarter and get working into the tables. So I will complete this as if it's Q2 in this fiscal year. So we know that there are no returning youth and everyone is just going to be new. So I'm going to say that 5 youth were trained or working as youth development staff, 45 were reached directly other than above, which will give us a nice round 50. And then I know that I have to enter 0 in there so that the equation will show up that there were 0 returning youth, because we haven't had any chance to have a youth return yet. And then I will complete the youth reach indirectly, and I'll just put around 100. And so we have the data check here that is saying, based on the numbers you provided, you have directly reached 50 youth in Q2. We know if there were any returning youth, that number would be added here. Say there were 25 returning, we would know there were 75 youth written here. So just a really good data check to make sure that it aligns with what you were expecting. And then moving down, we'll want to, we can see that now the total number of youth reached directly is pre-populating in the ones that we do need to kind of compare what our calculated field is to that number of youth reached directly. And so we know that there were 50 youth reached directly. So all of these boxes that I'm entering in should end up equaling up to 50. So I'll kind of just do 10 5 times. Again, I'm just making this data up as I go. It'll be very different once your programs are completing it. And I'll say that we ended up knowing everyone here. So then it shows up as 50. say, for instance, if I change the data, you won't really get an alert if I don't think you're gonna get an alert. We haven't figured out how to do that in REDCap yet, but the second that we do, to help your programs be able to be like, okay, the numbers don't match, we will do that. But so I can see right here that 48 and 50 is a discrepancy. And so I need to go in and look and make sure that this number does actually reach 50 and equals 50. And then again, apologies that we all have to enter 0 in here, but to be able to submit the form, we do need to have zeros written in to have the equation and then have everything completed. So for question 4, we know that a youth can belong to more one racial or ethnic category. So for the purposes of this, I will just show how you can end up selecting or being able to enter more than 50 here. And so this one will be okay because it must be greater than or equal to the number of youth trained or reached directly. So this equation is going to show us that there's 100, but because we have that caveat about being able to include in more than one, it's okay that it's 100 over 50. And then we'll be able to just select all of the zeros here. If there was an easier way to do the zeros, I would have done that for you all. So I do apologize for that. And then so we have gender identity categories. We want this to add up to the number of youth trained directly. So this will also need to equal 50 as well. So I'll just enter some 10s until we get to 50 to be able to be there. I do see there's some notifications in the chat. I can pull them up to see. Okay. And thank you, Keisha, for adding the Zoom options in there. I'm so appreciative of that. Great. And then for the priority youth categories, we do recognize that this is not, might not equal up to the number of youth directly reached. So it is okay, and there is no data check for this. It's just truly what youth you are reaching in your program. So that is the end of part 1. And then we move into part 2, where you'll report and quantify those activities. Again, you will only see the tables for the activities that you have selected. There is an other. So if you do select that other, you will get a table that allows you to really share what that other activity is. And we will continue to monitor and see that and see if there's a lot of programs, including the same other, that should end up being a a checked category as well. So we can routinely be able to collect that data as well. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to select one. So there's not too much data that we have to enter, but I will select drop-in space. So as you can see, as that just happened, the drop-in space just showed up. So if I deselect it and I select behavioral health or supports, you'll see the behavioral health or supports tables will then show up. So you will only see the data that you are required to submit based on the activities that you've selected, you've done. So now I'm in drop-in space. I can look at if it's a physical drop-in space, a virtual drop-in space, or individual check-ins, and be able to select which of the actual activities my program was doing. So I'm going to say that we did do drop-in space, but we did not do virtual or individual. As I selected yes, the tables for drop-in space did show up as well. And so because drop-in space, virtual drop-in space, those are both kind of set to being like a physical drop-in space versus virtual. That one question about if it was hybrid, virtual, or in person does not show up here, but you will see that in the other activity. So that's just a discrepancy between this specific activity and most of the other ones that I did show in the PowerPoint and that you'll see here. So I can write the number of new youth participants. So in this example, if drop-in space is the only thing that I'm doing, and I said that there were 50 youth that we directly reached, then it would make sense that those 50 youth all were directly reached through this drop-in space, but that might not be the case if you have a bunch of different activities. So there's no direct need to make sure these numbers reach the numbers that you have, but to round out the idea of this, I could say that there were 50 new youth that participated, no returning youth because this is Q2 and we haven't submitted data yet this year. And then it will calculate for me the total number of youth participants in this activity in this quarter. I then need to briefly describe how this activity was implemented. So it might be like after school space for youth experiencing X. And then I can describe more. I could also say the space was provided for 2 hours. We also included discussion topics to discuss with the groups, or something just to kind of share exactly what's going on and how this activity was implemented in your program.
So to clarify, the same youth could be counted in multiple activities?
Absolutely, yes, yep. Whatever they're doing, we want to know how much they're being reached by your program and everything that they are involved in. I've already selected no for virtual drop-in space and check-ins, but just perhaps if we also provided a virtual drop-in space, I would select yes, and then we would have that table show up as well. If you ever selected yes, and then we're like, and you left that open but didn't complete it, you would get an error to go back and make sure it's completed. But if you select no without the completion, there's nothing that you're required to submit. Just to show kind of that mode of activity, which was shown in the PowerPoint slides for individual check-ins, because we don't really know if this is virtual or hybrid based on how we're describing the activity name. You do have the extra part of filling in what the mode of activity is. And then for the ones that might be like a one-off type of activity, we might ask more about like the total number of youth check-ins conducted, the actual quantification of that activity. Whereas if we have drop-in space, it might just be one drop-in space, so we don't ask that specifically. So that's what's important about looking at the template that we've provided, so that you're aware of like all the nuances to that specific activity that you're conducting and what might be a different type of method that we're asking about, just to clearly be able to quantify that activity in a way that makes sense. And then we move to part 2. So have you made any adaptations? Just for this, I'm going to say no, so they don't pop up and I don't have to respond to them, but you'll kind of read these questions and say yes or no, and then give a description as well. So for example, if I select yes, if yes shows up, and you're able to provide a response there as well. And then because we selected quarter 2, the part 3 did show up. Here it is. And you will be required to add a description in each of these planning and evaluation activities, updates about what your program has done. Moving down, then asks to what degree your program has increased its capacity. So you have the options of small, medium, large, or none. We do ask that you select at least one of these responses for each of them. And we have provided none, just in case, because it varies likely that perhaps in that quarter, you weren't able to get to this activity. So you can provide none and then say perhaps why it's none, that it's going to be a priority in quarter 3, or that you're waiting to hire in this specific program, or there's been a stall in hiring about that specific someone who's going to lead that priority or activity. And then I'm just going to put an X in all of these. Not the description that we do want to see, but just for having something in all these boxes, I will do that to save us time. And then what additional supports you need to improve your capacity in these areas, you would just provide a description here about what those additional supports are. And then again, we have the positive or negative unintended consequences. So if you select no, you don't get a text box that shows up. If you select yes to either of these, you can select both yeses. You will just share what those are here. And we have this set up that you can't say yes and no. It will give you an error. So now that I have all of the yeses selected, if I try to hit no, I get an incompatible checkbox selection. And then I can say to clear all the other sections and only leave no, or I can hit cancel and it won't select no. But because I have no here, no box shows up. And then the only text box that you can leave open is this last optional one to describe any other specific aspects of your program or services, or the youth you serve that you want MDPH to know about. And so if you leave this one blank, it is the only one that won't give you an error. But I'm just going to add this in here as well, that we do want to hear anything else you want to share with us. Then you're going to I'm going to skip that for a second and just show that kind of along the side, you can see that there is a save and exit form or a save and stay. So as you're working on it, especially if there's other people that might be looking at the record at the same time and you want to save it, you can save and stay. So I'm going to do this right now just because I believe it might give me, yes. So if you don't complete some of the fields that are required, but say you're just saving and staying, it will give you an alert to what those fields are. And so as I scroll down, you won't see this, but you'll get the okay or ignore and leave record. And these 4 are actually the submission information below here. So because we do require that we need the name, email address, phone number, and date, once you save it, even though you didn't say it was complete, it still will give you a warning of things that are missing. So I can go back to that alert and say, okay, I'm going to go add them in, or you can ignore and leave the record. You just can't mark it complete yet until those are filled in. So I did save it kind of as a draft. So it's saved as an incomplete record. If I go back now, if I go back to my record status dashboard, I'll see it as an incomplete record here. Again, I can go to the record. I can change the name. So I'll just quickly do training test, just so I know that this is the one I've been working on with you guys as a training test. And then I can select that record again to go back and open it up and be able to continue working on it. So now I know maybe I had to step back with my program and figure out who we want to name as a submission information. Now I know I'm going to enter my own stuff. So I'm going to put my name in here. I'm going to put my email address. The email address will look for that @ space dot something. So it does know it's looking for a specific email address. And then I'm just going to put in a random phone number in here. It will also format it to make sure it looks like a true phone number and it knows what it's looking for. And then for the date, you can always go back to when it was actually done, or you can just select today and it'll give the date of today. And then the green is like, all right, everything looks good in this specific table. I can either leave it incomplete because I want other people to go in and look and we're not ready to say it's totally complete, or I know that it's ready, it's complete. I can mark it as complete, and then the green, as long as everything's filled out, the green button will show up. And that will also be shared with the contract managers. They'll be able to see the status of your record. So that is something that they'll be able to see that it's still incomplete or being worked on, or if it is green to them, it will look complete to them and they'll be able to be like, okay, this program has their data done. So I'm going to save and exit form. There are no locking privileges yet. I only have the locking privileges and I won't set them up. So the data won't be locked until we do make that determination of a date to lock them, where you just can't go back in and edit. But for now, we're going to leave them unlocked if you do need to go back in and edit for any reason. But we do want to see all of the fields completed by January 20th. I think that is everything that I wanted to share today for the training. As we move in and do enter data, I will work on a training for the data experts, reports, and stats. Feel free to look around and see what you get when you do look at an export or a report or a stat. But I will develop a training that allows us to go together and use that together. I think, okay, I'm just going to go back up to make sure I'm reading these in order. Yes, if there was only one volunteer event held and it was only attended by 3 youth, you should still check that off because that is an activity you're providing. We definitely want to see all of the different things. Even if only 1 youth is being involved in that specific activity, it's something you're offering. And that could be something that, say you offer an activity and no youth were involved, that could be something you leave in some of the comments and say, we are offering this, we haven't seen an uptake yet, so we're working on ways that we can recruit more youth for the volunteer activity as well. If it's via phone, was there an other option? So I'm just going to go back really quick and check if there was an other option, because I think phone could be other. If not, I would assume that that's virtual instead of in person. But I would like to hear if there's any programs that have a specific definition of phone work, because that does kind of toe the line between in person and virtual, and existed before the virtual sphere really existed as well. So I just opened this up. Oh yeah, so you can select other. And then you might want to put in the comments that the other mode of activity is via phone. And then so say you do select something in one of these tables and go back to switch this to no, it'll erase whatever's in that table, and you'll get kind of this notification that shows up to erase it. And I'll just go back and make sure I save and exit that. Okay, great. And then are we answering how much our capacity has grown because of the HEAL grant? I will welcome contract managers to also chime in about this specific question, but I believe it could be both. I think if you're doing efforts outside of the HEAL grant, in that, I think we still would want to know, but we do want to know what you are doing because of the HEAL grant as well. I see Jane is nodding in agreement with that statement.
I have another question that is maybe geared more towards contract managers, but I'm wondering about the implications of choosing the different activities or services. For example, you know, we have a drop-in space where we're offering all sorts of different services that could be counted either in drop-in or the services. I'm inclined to maybe keep it simple and be like, we serve this many youth in the drop-in, but I'm wondering if there's any kind of further consideration or implication around what services we're selecting based on, you know, which grant we have.
I'm very curious, and I'll definitely defer to Steve because he's the contract manager. I'm very curious, so I'd like to know as much as possible what it is that you're doing. Some of the work that you're doing could actually be leading our efforts into new types of content area. So I recommend putting as much information as you feel that is appropriate. It kind of builds off of what Ben had mentioned about this will also show us or acknowledge the capacity, you know, like how your capacity has grown through the HEAL grant. Of course, if you have questions, always reach out to Steve. He's the contract manager. But again, I'm nosy or curious, and more is better for me.
Sure, I'm happy to write a lot of details, but given that we're halfway through the year, our data isn't configured to have like more quantifiable, like what we gave, you know, this one person a basic need and this is that. I can like tell you more about the services and give more like general numbers, I guess. You know, given that it's halfway through the contract, I think we
That
can
makes
learn from
sense.
this and do the best that we can and share as much detail as we can, but you know, we're not set up to maybe report out on more specific numbers, I guess, until seeing this report.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, you weren't collecting the information and you weren't in dialogue with Steve during quarter 1 and 2 because you didn't submit the data. So that's fine. What you have is fine. We're thrilled that you're doing the work. You're doing amazing work, and we will definitely work with you and support you so that what you're doing and what you're reporting accurately reflects the work that you're doing, if that kind of makes sense. Because sometimes we may not have the right language in the report to adequately capture the amazing work that you're doing. And we have a couple of more questions.
Yep, I did just answer Kyla's question about, to clarify, quarter 2 wouldn't have returning participants, but quarter 3 would have returning participants, and that is absolutely correct. In future fiscal years, that will only occur in quarter 1, but based on this year being slightly delayed and we didn't do quarter 1 reporting, it will be quarter 2 has no returning this year.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions that people have related to using the tool, reporting requirements, interpretations, troubleshooting what you're doing, anything? We have plenty of space to answer any questions that you have.
I have one question. For the one on program partnerships, when it says, have we partnered with any new organizations since last reporting period? For the first of the fiscal year, do you want us putting all of our partners or truly just the new partnerships?
Jane, I will lean on you for that. I think I would be interested in all of your partnerships in the first quarter that you, or in this first reporting period that you've worked on in this grant, even if they're the same that you were working on if you previously had funding through this stream as well, because it would be nice to know where you're coming in at and what the baseline of your partnerships are, and then to see it grow in future quarters as well. So it would be nice to have a baseline of everyone that you've worked with related to this grant.
I agree, and this will also help you in your planning and thinking for your community engagement, because the partners that you are currently working with will probably be part of that plan as well.
Okay,
Does that
thank you.
make sense, or is that
Yeah, it
helpful?
does. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
And that's a good question to also bring up next year, because then we can consider, are we looking at Q1 next year? Do we want to know where you're coming in next year? Or do we want to know just who is new for this year versus the previous year as well? So that's something I will keep in mind too. But I think especially for this first time for this whole funding experience through HEAL, it'd be nice to know everyone you're coming in with.
And there's a couple of more questions. Do you want me to read, or can you see, Lindsay?
Yes, I see them now. Thank you. So if you need additional REDCap logins, you can email me, but please CC your contract manager as well. So any communication that we really truly would like all communications to be going through the contract manager. So even if you just email them and they forward it to me, but I will be able to submit if you provide me a first name, last name, email address, and just if you could confirm what organization you're writing from, I can then submit them to our admin who will create the accounts. I might not be able to do it immediately because to reduce the burden on the admin and not send one-off ones several times a week. And maybe I'll wait till Thursdays to do it. But if it is immediate, please provide me that notice that you immediately need to get them access. So, and I'll put in the chat too, those requirements as well for what I need just to be able to create the account. And you can have as many users as you would wish. It would just be helpful to know when someone no longer needs access. We really want to try to keep a good log of what accounts are active, what accounts aren't, what accounts can be deleted. And I would like to keep that log pretty correct. And so then our admin can delete any users that don't need the information anymore. So if you could also at any point, someone's leaving, a role is changing and they don't need that account, just let us know and we'll delete that account too. And we'll also check to make sure we do really want to try to have at least 2 users for every account, just in case something happens with one account, you always have access through another. So if I do see that removing an account only leads to having one for that program, I might just ask that we can try to find another contact to make sure there's 2 accounts associated with that program.
Can I ask a question? We have REDCap for another program through DPH, and I believe the business assistant has like an admin login for that. Would that carry over to this program as well in being a second source?
As long as I know the username and I can give that user specific access to this project.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we can come back to question and answers, but I can just move forward just to show a little bit about next steps and kind of just one more time clarify what is due on January 20th and what's moving forward. And then we can go back to question and answers or some work time as well. So data submission for year 1, quarters 1 and 2. In year 1 only, all data from July through December 2022 will be reported in quarter 2. when you are submitting data for this first time this fiscal year, select Q2. We know that you'll be providing data for both Q1 and Q2, but you will be selecting Q2. All use should be reported as new for the first HEAL quarterly report you submit. And those will be entered in the new column, and 0 should be entered for all of the returning columns. And we just ask that all programs submit data combined for consistency. You might have data disaggregated by Q1 and Q2, and we thank you for being ahead of doing that and having that specific data. But just for our own ways of being able to report consistently across all programs, if you could just all submit it as one record in Q2, that would be greatly appreciated. And so our next steps are for you to complete that reporting as one submission of Q2 by the end of day, January 20th, 2023. We do recognize this lands on a weekday. There will definitely be 20th of months that don't land on a weekday and it's a weekend. So we will clearly kind of communicate what our expectations are for that. It'll likely just be the last weekday before that due date, unless you happen to want to be working on the weekend and submit it as well. But we just wanted to keep a consistent day, just so it was very clear and we could remember it's always going to be April 20th and then July 20th for Q4 and things like that. Please let your contract manager know if you have any concerns or questions. They can then elevate specific data questions to me, but we do want to keep the contract managers as much in the loop and the constant point of communication as possible. I will schedule a spring 2023 REDCap training. I haven't decided if I want to look at just the Q2 report data or if I want to wait one more quarter reporting period to be able to show you how to look at more than one quarter of data at a time. So I'm leaning towards that second one, but maybe I can provide TA assistance before Q3 as well. And if you have thoughts about how you would like to see training and technical assistance for the quarterly report in REDCap, you can also share that either in the optional comment box or with your contract manager as well. So the remaining time, it's 11:15, so there's 15 more minutes, is yours to explore REDCap, enter data, log off, go and do other things that you need to do, but I will remain on this call at least until 11:30 to kind of be here to help anyone who has additional questions. So the contract manager's emails are shown on the slide, as well as my email is included as well. I have put my email in the chat, but can do that as well. And yes, so thank you. This slide was recorded. This presentation was recorded. We will share the recording. And then we will be sharing the PowerPoint presentation as well. I also will probably add the Word documents again and the previous recordings as again, just so you have all of the resources available to you in the next 10 days to get it done. So thank you so much for all of your attentive participation and working through something that can be really redundant and monotonous. But I'm glad that we were able to work through this together and you really brought some really great questions. So I know you've been thinking about the data and how to share that with us.